Are you ready to join me in transforming fear to freedom? That's the objective of the show. Are you ready to explore with me and my guests? Are you ready to get into the deep and play? This is where it's at, and that's what it's all about. No medical advice here. Use discernment and decide for yourself if the information is right for you. All views and opinions expressed on this show belong to the individual and are not necessarily shared with the producer of the show. Want more details? Go to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com. Now let's get real and have some fun. Who are we going to explore with today? Come on with me and let's get into the deep. Welcome to another episode of Let's Get Real Chatting with Catherine. My absolute pleasure today to be able to chat again with Dr. Lesley Phillips. Dr. Lesley Phillips has been a guest on my show previously, and we talked about her upcoming book, which is now out, and it's called The Midas Tree. And it's an absolutely intriguing adventure book, which she's gone into many layers to talk about metaphysical things, but in a very practical storybook kind of way. And we'll get into what it felt like for her to write this book and to what the impact has been so far, what people are saying. And we're also going to chat with her about her Portico cards. We've talked about that before, but I find them very intriguing, and I want to see what else she's doing with them and what else she's got going on. So this should be a lot of fun. Dr. Lesley Phillips, as I said, has been a guest on the show previously. You can read her full bio, get the links to how to get the book and so forth on letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com. And you can go to the guest page and scroll for her name, and then you'll get all her information. Of course, I invite you to interact with me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the social media, and check out my blog as well. And you can get all those links right on letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com. You can get the show updates and find out what's coming and listen to the archive shows while they're still available. So let's get into this Midas Tree with Dr. Lesley Phillips right now. All right, well, we are back once again with Dr. Lesley Phillips, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to chat with you. We have talked about her upcoming book in the last interview, and now it's finally here, and The Midas Tree, which is so exciting, and so I'm so thrilled to be able to get into this information with you today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Lesley.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So, as we talked about previously on the show, you know, your history, and encourage people to go back to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com, go to the guest page, and read Dr. Lesley's bio, because it's fairly extensive, and all the links to the book and so forth is there. But I just want to give people listening today a little bit of background. You actually came from a science background first, and then you taught metaphysical meditation and all kinds of things, and do channeling work, and now we're at the book. Some people, having a book is their major goal. You've already covered so much territory. How does it feel in this it's a new area, right? Being an author and so forth. How does that differ from some of your other accomplishments?
Well, I think it's very different. I mean, it feels fantastic. It's an amazing accomplishment to write a book. And so I'm delighted with that. How does it compare to some of my other accomplishments? I guess a way to answer that would be to say that the book was written not with my intellectual mind, but it was written as a channeled information. And so it was a spiritual download. So many of the things that I've accomplished in the past, at least on the scientific side, anything I would have written there was very much on an intellectual basis. And so the metaphysical work I do and the writing that I do is done much more on an intuitive basis. So that's the main difference.
Right. And so, you know, I noticed in the book, which, you know, we maybe should give people a little bit of an idea. When you say channeled, what do you mean by channeled?
Yes, so the book was a spiritual download. And the way that it came to be written was I was aware that I was ready to write a book, and I spent a few hours meditating on clearing blockages to being able to bring through what it was I was going to write about. And so that night, all of the information about the book came to me. And so to write the book, all I had to do was enter a meditative state, and I was able to basically watch what was unfolding in the story of the book using my clairvoyance. Now, it's my belief that that is a higher part of myself that has created the book, and so I'm channeling information that's coming from myself. I know a lot of people have the concept that well, channeling can be a number of things. It can be you bringing through your own spirit and your own energy, or it can be bringing through another entity or being.
Right.
And so in my case, I'm not channeling another entity or being. I do work with spirit guides in the spiritual work I do, but I don't bring them in and let them use my body. An example of somebody who does that might be J.Z. Knight and Ramtha, for example, or Esther Hicks and Abraham. They're examples of psychics who are bringing through great spiritual information, but they're actually allowing another entity to use their body in order to do that.
Right, and that's not what you do, and that's not what the book is.
No.
But it's very cool. It's like when you say, it's sort of like you were watching the movie, so you were actually just writing what you were seeing in this fantasy.
Yes, it was like a multi-sensory movie that I was watching.
Wow.
So I was able to see, hear, and even tune into the emotions of the characters as they were going through the adventures. And so, you know, we live in the physical world, we live in space and in time, but we're actually multidimensional spiritual beings, our consciousness that exists outside of space and time. And so the way I look at it is I created this book as a spiritual consciousness, and it was already fully formed, right? Because it's not existing in space and time. And then from this perspective, I'm able to tune in and play it like a little video recording.
But so did you, when you sat down to meditate on, you felt you were ready to write a book, did you know it was going to be like a children's book, or was there something in you that was saying, I'd like to help children? Or because this is, you know, you say it's for children of all ages, and I totally agree, because it's not like a cartoony thing. It's really deep on one level. On another level, you could read it just for the sheer enjoyment of this challenge of the little character Joshua. But at the same time, there's lessons, there's layers that, as an adult, I found myself getting confirmation and really getting these lessons. So did you have an intent, like a conscious intention of who your audience was going to be, or was it just that something was in you that wanted to be birthed?
So I didn't have a conscious intention. The only conscious intention was, I know that my path is to be a spiritual messenger. I know that my path is to teach people that they're spirit, and that's what I'm here to do. And I knew I was ready to bring my message and my information out to a larger audience. But I certainly didn't know that I was going to bring through something that could be helpful to children in advance. I mean, I literally just disengaged my intellect, didn't question what was coming through, wrote it all down, and then took a step back and said, what have I created here, and who is it for?
So when people are reading this book, I mean, I think it's great for people to buy it and read it for their own, as an adult, their own entertainment. But what I discovered when I was reading it was I have a new grandson. He's just, 4 months old, just a little over 4 months old. And my understanding is the new children that are coming in, very often or maybe we were too, but they're very open. And if we don't teach them to forget, they'll continue to remember their connection to source and so forth. So what I was thinking is, would be very cool to read that to a young child in, not all at once, but in segments, and then have that exploring with them because it confirms some things that we already do know at, like you say, at another level. And it just brings it back to our awareness. That's what I felt like I was doing a bit when I was reading. I was remembering or revealing to myself something I really already knew. And so I thought it would be fun to read to the children before they forget, before they're taught to forget.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I mean, really, that's my favorite definition of what a teacher is. A spiritual teacher is somebody who is helping you remember what you already know and not teaching you something new. And you're right. I mean, that my greatest wish and hope for the book is twofold. Number one, that it will help a whole generation of children to stay connected with their spiritual awareness and their spiritual consciousness, and two, that it will help a generation of adults to remember their spiritual information. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right that it's my belief that this is one of the main issues on our planet. Is, I mean, all children are born spiritually aware, but most of the adult population has forgotten, and they don't validate their children for the experiences that they're having. And so the child learns to adopt behaviors that are rewarded and validated. And pretty soon, just like the adults around them, they have forgotten too. And you're right that there's a generation of children that are exceptionally bright, and it's very important that we do what we can to help them to not to lose that connection.
So would you hold the belief, like some people, I'm not big on labels myself, but there are different, there's the indigos and the crystals, and now we have rainbows and all that. Do you hold those kinds of beliefs? Do they mean anything to you? Do they describe different phases or children's?
So I must admit, I've not spent a lot of time researching those terms. Okay. but I guess one thing that I do believe is that every single person on this planet has spiritual abilities. Mm-hmm. So it's not in the realms of somebody who is born with a special gift.
Right.
We all have it. Everyone, just like everyone has a pair of eyes and can see, everyone has a sixth chakra and is capable of using their clairvoyance. Now, just like any other walk of life, certain people are drawn to that and want to focus on it, and certain others are not.
Right.
And so, and I guess my only one concern about having these groups of people that are labeled in a certain way is that they will be set apart as being more special than others and have a whole set of expectations placed upon them. Yeah. I think what's more important is to teach all children to have a direct connection with spirit and to validate them for who they are.
Right.
And not necessarily even place them in any particular group with a label.
Yeah. Well, but I do think that it's, the books like yours, which have the various layers of writing. Like I heard a child on a YouTube video recently, and he wasn't very old, and his verbal skills were fantastic. I was quite amazed. And what occurred to me is that so often we've had children's books written in language that is almost insulting to them, really. I mean, there is fun in little rhymes and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
You know, but this book, I feel like with maybe because I'm more aware of the intellect of children, perhaps that's what I'm really speaking to, is that I can see that reading a book of that level of communication that you have presented, it actually conveys a message to children, which is, we don't think you're stupid. We think you're capable of understanding, of comprehending the message in a book like that. Like I really congratulate you for not writing it in with a verbiage that is so, writing down to. And like you said, I know you said you didn't really have a specific age group in mind, but I feel like even a 2-year-old can get that if we don't put on this label that you can't get this until you're 5.
Right. Yes. Well, no, that's really great. That's really great feedback. And you know, somebody told me a story once, and what you're saying kind of reminds me of the story.
Okay.
And the story was that there was a couple. They already had one child, and they had a new baby. And the little toddler kept asking to be left alone with the baby. And of course, they were a bit concerned about doing that, because sometimes little kiddies get jealous of their new sibling.
Right.
But the little toddler was so insistent that they set it up so that she could go and talk to the baby, because they put one of those
nanny cam.
Yeah, and so they could hear what she was saying.
Right.
And so they let her go in, and what she said was to the baby, "What's it like to be with God? You've just come from God, and you're so close to him, and I've almost forgotten, and I want to remember."
Wow.
It just makes me want to cry
Yeah.
to say that story. But the point is that children are so close to spirit, and so connected with spirit, and spiritual awareness actually isn't even about the human intellect at all. It's something a bit different.
Right. Well, and I think that, we are starting to, or more of us are starting to open ourselves to understanding this, and to recognizing that just because a person has started a new life in a new little tiny body doesn't mean they don't have a wisdom that is beyond ours, even, and I think a lot of people are starting to get that. But I like what you said, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on them too, oh, you just came from God and we expect you to know everything now. I mean, that's not it either. It's just, It's becoming really open to letting them be who they truly are.
Exactly. Giving them the tools and techniques and the space to know who they are and connect with that themselves.
Right.
Because only you can truly know yourself. Anybody else just has their perception of what that is. So including all parents about their children.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always discovering something new. And I mean, we discover something new about ourselves too, if we allow to get to know. So you can't really know your child inside out either. That makes sense. But the other thing that I really like about the book is that you also used a lot of science, a lot of your understanding inside the tree, and I think that also made it intriguing for me, because I always loved biology and that when I was in school, and it was just fun to have it in the book, but not like a separate lesson, but it was just part of it, part of the teachings.
Yes, yeah. And so, I mean, I like being able to use analogies from nature and biology in order to help bring through the spiritual teachings. But also, I mean, in our world, there's so much separation between different things, isn't there? But these days, science and spirituality are coming closer together. They're making discoveries in physics that are backing up what the metaphysicians have been saying for centuries. And so I think I was brought up to really separate the two, and I think it's helpful not to do that.
Well, and I mean, that is part of the reason why I do this show, is because I want to that was how I was feeling. We have, politics and social issues over in one category, and spirituality and metaphysical over here, and it's like you can't talk about the two things, and it's everything is separate. Well, no wonder we're dysfunctional. It's like saying, your head can't talk about your feet. I mean, it's all one body. I noticed.
Absolutely.
Well, I just saw recently Marianne Williamson, who's known, as a spiritual teacher, and she had made some kind of comments about the Iraq War, and she got a lot of feedback that they asked her to just talk about what she knew in spirituality and leave the politics and things like that alone. And she had a very precise and excellent response to that, was that they're not separate. She would be totally, letting just to compartmentalize her like that would be ridiculous. She's a human being. She has a right to her opinions and expressions, but also bringing spiritual teachings into our practical day to day. And that's what I love about, you didn't tell us a fantasy story that took place so much in a world that with everything was unreal. Inside a tree, which is something we can relate to. You can't get much more grounded than a tree. That's real. That's something we can get. And so that's the other part that I wanted to ask you about, because there's a lot of story around the grounding process and the importance of that. Now, do you feel that is something that because I do hear about that a bit, people that get into spirituality but they're not grounded. Could you speak to that? How do you feel about that?
Well, grounding is the very first meditation technique that I teach any of my students, and it is a foundational technique on which to base any further spiritual development work, and it's very important. And I always say to my students, if you learn one single meditation technique your whole lifetime and that's it, learn to ground, because it is so powerful. You can change your entire reality through that one technique. You can completely transform yourself through that one technique. And basically what it's doing, it's kind of analogous to an electrical grounding. We are spirit. We are not our physical bodies. We are high vibration, multi-dimensional, eternal spiritual beings of light. Okay? We exist outside of space and time, but we've created these bodies as a vehicle to have some experiences and to expand our consciousness through.
Right.
And so in order for you to make the most of this life, it's kind of important for you to connect with this physical body that you've created. And this might sound quite strange, but most people are not connected with their bodies. And grounding helps to anchor you, the high vibrational spiritual being, into your physical body. And then you can start to really take charge of your life. And you can look around and you can say, well, gosh, look at what I've created here. I don't like some of this. And then for what you don't like, whether it's you're feeling stress, tension, or you've created some physical situation in your life, you can use the grounding technique to release what it is that you don't want anymore. And as you do that, you create the space for something new to come in. So that's what I mean when I say that single technique can transform your entire life. It starts to help you to wake up and become conscious and be more in control of your life.
Yeah. And I think that's the real message that I keep hearing and is in your book is the importance of taking your own power.
Absolutely.
Joshua, that's his big thing. I mean, not giving away the book, because believe me, I'm not going to tell you anything here today if you're watching this that's going to reveal this book, because it's so deep and yet so not deep. Like, you can take it however you want to, but that's the thing, is there is no superhero in here that saves Joshua. I mean, it's Joshua who's the hero in his own life, and I think I like that message, and that's the kind of message I love to give to children, is to let them know that they don't have to look outside of themselves for that superhero.
Because that's actually the real truth for everybody.
Yeah.
That you're in charge of and in control of your own life, or you're meant to be.
Yeah.
And it's nobody else's job or responsibility to do it for you. In fact, they can't.
Exactly.
And so this whole book is exactly, you're right. It's about becoming empowered, finding who you are, and living your life path. And being able to, I mean, this physical reality does come with its challenges. We all face them in our lives, but the book delivers some spiritual techniques that not only that help Joshua in his fairy tale-like adventure, but could help every single person who reads the book or who's listening to this in their life, whether they're an adult or a child,
right?
To overcome their challenges and obstacles that they face in their life, whatever it may be, whether it's an illness, whether it's a relationship issue, whether it's a career issue, whether it's a depression, like, you name it, any problem you might have, there's some help for you in this book.
Yeah, I agree.
In terms, yeah.
I do. I absolutely agree. And also, what I see is, when you said you saw it as a movie, I wondered, because it is so magical and so forth, have you thought about that, creating it into a movie? I know maybe it would be more like a series than a movie, but because there's so many layers, but have you considered that?
I have considered it. And I have a friend who is a screenwriter. I've asked her to read the book and give me some feedback on that. But you're also right in that every chapter in the book lends itself to a distinct piece.
Yeah.
And so it could be cut into chunks. And I've thought about a few different ideas. One is having it on a radio show, and every episode is a different chapter in the book, for example.
Right.
But the other thing is that I want to develop a companion guidebook for teachers.
Oh, wow.
To help guide them to be able to use the Midas tree with their pupils as a teaching tool, to teach them life skills and to teach them how to meditate. And so in that scenario, each chapter would be taken as a separate discrete lesson for them to use and work with their class.
And would the workshop be available to parents as well?
The workbook, yes, it would be for parents and for teachers. And, you were talking about indigo and crystal children and so on. And I know that there are some schools and groups for those kids. And I think this book would be perfect for teachers within those kinds of settings.
Yeah, you might not be able to have it in mainstream classrooms, but on the other hand, as you also said, all children are born this way, open. So even if you can't get it into the public schools, parents and grandparents and whatever can certainly use something like that. So that would be fun. I know you're just thinking about this now. Do you have an idea that the workbook would come out fairly soon, or?
Yes, that's the next project that I am focusing on. I also have some sequels to the book planned as well.
Oh, nice.
But I'd like to do the workbook first, and and focus on getting the book not just to individual people, but out to groups of people who can benefit from it.
Sure. Yeah, that would be fantastic. And also, then you have your Portico cards, which I know we did talk about previously, but now, are they totally separate, or do you see, because sometimes our lives, things have separate places, but sometimes they sort of flow into each other. So I kind of wondered if your Portico cards, which are a little bit like using angel cards or something like that, right?
A little bit. Well, when I first created those, and I created those before the book, I did have ideas that they could be used with kids, or they could be used by psychologists and counselors with their clients, because the books, the cards are very, what they're meant to do is to help open the intuition. And the name Portico, I got that because the entrance to an ancient temple is called a portico.
Right.
And I see these cards as windows or doorways into the temple of yourself, if you like.
Wow, nice.
And they're a way of activating and opening the intuition.
Right.
And so, I mean, I've always felt that art and even dreams and so on are great doorways, great first steps into the intuition, especially if you've been programmed and taught and trained to operate predominantly from an intellectual basis. It can be difficult at first for you to bypass that intellectual mind, but by looking at images of art, it's a way of sort of helping transport you immediately into that more receptive, intuitive state.
Right. And so, and those are something people can they get those from your website, Lesley?
Yes, they can. They can find out about the Portico card deck on drlesleyphillips.com. You have to order those directly from me. The book is available on Amazon, but you can go to drlesleyphillips.com or the midastree.com, and that will explain how to buy the book. There's a button that clicks you straight through to the purchase page on Amazon.
But if somebody wants to use the cards, is there an instruction, or like how do you, is it something that they do by their own intuition, or how do you use cards like that? Is there instructions, or how?
Yes, there is a small instruction booklet with the card deck, and for people who purchase it and who want to write to me and request it, I have a more detailed ebook that I give to people who've purchased the card deck for free as a thank you. And there are many ways of using this card deck, and it can depend on the individual person as well. So I've written some key words and key phrases on the base of each card. So for those who are maybe more linguistically focused, or they're having a little bit of trouble with the visualization, that's a way of helping them. When I'm teaching my classes, I encourage people to, if they can, rather than look at the written messages on the cards, to focus on the images. Because like I said, they're doorways into a multi-dimensional world. They are not linear. They are not, it's not the same as I guess they're multi-dimensional, they're not linear. And so, what I encourage people to do is to look at the image and allow the image to just take them to places. Mm-hmm. And the images on the cards, they're kind of semi-abstract and they're highly symbolic. And so, and the colors as well, they all can help you to connect with meaning and messages around questions you might be asking.
And were they channeled from your higher self, or are they, would you say they're more of a channel, not from your intellect, but from your inspiration?
So I was explaining how the card deck came to be developed,
Yes.
and I was explaining that um, I went through about 5 years of very intense spiritual training, and while I was doing that, it opened up my creativity.
Mm,
And really, for me, just as a way of relaxing, I started to paint and to draw.
right.
And the drawings came like automatic drawings in a way, in that I wouldn't plan what I was going to draw. I'd just hold a pencil and um, some lines would come on the page, and that would be this image, perfectly formed image. And then I would, add color to it, and that was the way that the paintings were made. And I kept them very private for many years, because I'm not a trained artist, and I just thought they were very childlike, and they were just for my own enjoyment. But one day I was meditating, and I was given information that I should turn this into a card deck, and that I should sit and see if I should sit and do a clairvoyant reading on each of my paintings. And so I pulled out a bunch of them and sat for a couple of days and realized that I could do a clairvoyant reading on each of my paintings, and that each of them was unique and had a unique meaning.
Wow.
And so that's how the card deck was born. Kind of an accidental birth.
Well, and the thing is, we need childlike. I mean, that's so funny that you would think, that wouldn't be good enough, or that wasn't necessary. But, that's really to me, that's what it says. We need childlike. We need to become more in our creativity and that kind of thing. But so along with the cards and that came out, and you've been teaching metaphysical principles and understandings from your own learning, your own gifts, but then you also teach. So do you feel like, this is sort of more of a global thing that I want to ask you, but with what you've been teaching, how long have you been teaching? For quite a few years now.
Yeah, I've been teaching the form of meditation that's in my book since 2005. I started training to be a teacher in 2003, and I graduated in 2005. So I've been teaching it for quite a long time.
Right. But also you do private readings and things like that as well. So because your own gifts came to you before you went into training, am I right? Like
Yes, you're right. Going into that training really helped to activate and stimulate and help me to focus on developing them a lot more. But definitely, I before I did that intense spiritual training, I went into a number of other areas before that, and one of them was dream analysis. I kept a dream diary, and so for me, being a PhD scientist, it was hard for me to get out of my intellectual mind, and so the way I accessed my intuition for many years was through my dreams. I kept a dream diary, and through looking at what was happening in my dreams, I was able to connect with spiritual guidance. I even had evidence of my own past lifetimes, because I had dreams about myself in a different body and interacting with people in the current lifetime who were also in different bodies. I had premonitions of my own life, events that would happen, and people I would meet that I hadn't met yet that came true. And I also had premonitions of world events and so on. And so through those experiences in my dreams, I became more and more interested and fascinated and passionate, and it opened up a thirst to know more. And so then I started being involved with different spiritual groups who were interested in the same things that I was. And I did some training in the UK before I came to Canada as a healer and a clairvoyant. And then when I came to Canada, also spent many years after that in training as well.
Did you struggle with having a scientific background, pursuing science in your life, even though you knew you had some of these other abilities? Was there a real argument between the science you and the metaphysical you? Because the science back, 20 years ago even, was very, there was science and then there was woo-woo.
Yeah. So, not at the time I made the decision to go into science. No, there wasn't a question in my mind. At the time, that's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I do remember being 8 years old and doing some drawings at 8 years old and realizing that somehow what I'd drawn was conveying a deeper meaning. And at that time, I got this real realization that I was here to be a spiritual teacher. But what that meant to me at the time was all of this programming about what that means. That's like being a nun. You can't get married. You can't have children. You can't have any money. All of these like stereotypical things that you might think about that sort of overcame me. And so I was afraid, and I really remember just switching that realization off and then just pursuing the things that my parents and the world around me considered to be worthwhile ways of spending your time. And so at the time I decided to be a scientist, that's what I wanted to be. And I was a scientist in the pharmaceutical industry, and I have a deep drive inside of me to be a healer and to do something that is healing and going to benefit people. Right. And so, I'm sure, like a lot of people, if you're looking through the world through all that programming we have about how it is, then being a doctor or a scientist that helps discover drugs, it is a logical way that you think that you can pursue that. Right. But then I, as I continued on through my life and I had these experiences in my dreams and started investigating the other side of things, then I started to wake up. And while I was in that career path.
Do you think that today, though, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, but science is now starting to, validate a lot of metaphysical things? They're starting to, because there is a lot of stuff. Bruce Lipton is another one who really brings the science and the metaphysical together in a way that hasn't been done before. In his spontaneous evolution is one that comes to mind. And so do you see that happening now? Because you still, obviously, once you've learned and you are a scientist, I don't think that probably never goes away. So you still have both of those understandings. Do you see a coming together of those two?
Well, Bruce Lipton is a great example. He does a phenomenal job, and there are others out there too. Mm-hmm. And so there's definitely spokespeople in the world who are delivering this message. I think for me, I feel deeply connected with nature and with the planet. And my chosen field of study was actually originally biology, and then I ended up becoming a microbiologist. And so, but the connection is more with life and the planet as opposed to the intellectual way of thinking about it now. So I think that the way of being a scientist is different for me.
Okay.
And so I'm not necessarily a practicing scientist in a laboratory anymore. I don't do experiments and that kind of thing. And so, but I'm glad to see that more that those paths are coming together, and that there are people who are helping that come along.
Well, do you think then that as we, in your, you're working with people all the time, teaching and your book and different things, do you think that these kinds of things will awaken people to, like you say, know more that we are spirit, having this physical experience, so that we can interact with the planet in a more harmonious way? Do you think that that's what's happening? Is it's not just a trend or a fad that's happening. Something's happening on the planet, or at least it appears to be.
Yes, there's a massive transformational shift going on the planet, and the energy on the planet has been increasing in vibration for a number of years, and that explains a lot of things that have been going on, because when you look around you, a lot of our conventional structures have been breaking down. I mean, the financial world is a big one, but others as well, and that's because as the light switch is turned up brighter, some of the things that were hidden before are coming to the surface to be reviewed. So so yes, there is this transformation going on, and and we are being I don't know whether challenged is the right word, but I can't think of the right word, but we're being offered the opportunity to change our ways and to create our reality in a way that is more in alignment with the planetary environment. Mm-hmm. And actually, my book is very in alignment with that and in attunement with that. The symbol of the tree in the book is an analogy for planet Earth. And so, and Joshua, who starts out living in the garden of color and light, who goes on this adventure in the tree, it's analogous to us, the spiritual being born in a physical body into the physical world. And part of his challenge is, about he meets the creatures of the tree, whose job is to keep the tree healthy, mm-hmm. and to live in balance and harmony with the tree. And they teach him their ways of how to live in balance and harmony within his own body and within the environment around him as well. And so that one of those multi-layered messages within the book is exactly that. It's about living in harmony with the planet. And actually, one of the meditation techniques that Joshua is taught is called running earth energy. And it's about consciously flowing the energy of planet Earth through your own energy system. And that's a meditation technique that I teach in my classes. And it is a way of consciously helping you to stay in balance with the energy of the planet in this time of rapid change.
Well, what I was thinking is that as more, your book to me will help, like you say, the people that are already here, the new people coming in, and I'm just wondering if you have a vision of that. As more people become aware that we are connected to Earth, we are spirit, and so forth, that this kind of awakening, or I want to say contribution to the world's consciousness, because whenever anything gets out there into the mass consciousness, it has an effect. Would it be your belief that as we start to clue into that we will just naturally make better choices in all the other practical ways, like the financial, the economics, the environmental choices, through just, not that I know you didn't have a purpose of changing the whole world with your book, but it just seems to me that it's like a shift. If we get that, then we can get, instead of going in from the other end and trying to change the financial situation before the people are actually aware I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it feels like,
Yes, it's about having a spiritual perspective on the issues that are going on as opposed to just a physical perspective.
right.
And if people are not awake and connected with a spiritual reality when they address these problems, then they're going to address them in a certain way, and it would be a very different way perhaps if they were connected in that way. I mean, it's certainly my hope that the book will have an impact on all of these things. I can't predict what way the planet will go, because of course, as each of us individually creates our reality from the present moment, en masse as a species, we create our joint reality from the present moment.
Right.
So there is no set future path. We have the opportunity through our thoughts and actions and by waking up to change it.
But it would seem to me that, when I was growing up, just yesterday, but it was, there was a lot of emphasis put on separation of church and state. Now, I'm still for that. Like, religion is one thing. We're not talking about religion, but it does feel like that is what they were talking about, because there wasn't a lot of understanding of spirituality unless it was tied to a religion. So it feels like there was such this desire to keep everything else in life, everything was separate from your spiritual life. And that if we look at the mess we have, you could kind of see almost that it as a symptom of us being so disconnected from our spirituality. And I'm not, I'm not suggesting that religion, I'm not even talking about religion, I'm talking about spirit, who we really are, which is not connected to an organization. But it feels like this is what we're doing. We're leaning towards now accepting the fact that we need to be, in order to be healthy and whole, we're going to have to accept that we are multidimensional beings, spirit having physical experience, and by default, we will change the world.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure what the question is there, but I mean, sometimes I think there's not such a big I mean, I know there was a separation between religion and the other major what's the word?
Organizations and systems.
Organizations and so on. But in a way, the structure of all of them is the same, in that you have a hierarchy and a person at the top is telling you what to believe and how to believe it. You have an intermediary. In many religions, you kind of have an intermediary between yourself and God. And so the state separates the people from themselves, but religions have also separated them from themselves.
Well, that was my question. That is that it seems like that. It seems to me you can almost mark it on a calendar how we went from watching all of these things that have crumbled, and this whole disconnect from our spirituality, and now as people are starting to reconnect to their spirituality, how solutions or opportunity are showing up, and the old systems that totally held to this belief of disconnecting from spirit are crumbling.
Yes,
so,
yeah. Well, the way I look at it, is that we are all part of a whole. And if you think of that whole as a symphony, think of it as a symphony, the symphony of souls, and every individual on this planet has a note to play in that symphony. Right? The only way you can play your true note is to be connected with the source, or with that oneness, or with that wholeness.
Right.
We've been separated from our notes, and so the objective is to get that connection back. And so what my book is doing is it's teaching you how to make that direct connection with your own soul, your own spirit, your own higher self, whatever word you want to use for it. And then you can get your own information. You can realize who you are and what your unique note is in this great symphony of souls. And then as people start to do that, then they do what they're really meant to be doing and what they're really here for, and the whole thing functions in a better way.
Well, and the joyful thing about the book is, I mean, you can even tell it's not a scientific manual. It's fun. It's not written as an instruction. It's written as a story, almost like a fairy tale, a joyful adventure. But
it's an offering.
Yes,
it's a story. It's a fun story.
It's a fun
that you can read and enjoy. But you're also offered some tips and tools and techniques through the story that, if you want to, you can choose to adopt and use in your life.
Yeah.
You may find them helpful.
So you can actually, as a family, if you wanted to, you could read it out loud as after dinner or in the afternoon with your children, and mom and dad and grandparents and children would all get a message from reading the same story together. And each one would get it at their different level. That's what I love about it. It's
really
that
amazing. Would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Get out the popcorn and the book. I think that would be fun. I do.
I don't know how many families do that these days, but that would be wonderful.
Well,
and that is my hope, is that grandparents and parents will be able to read it together with their children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And people can make this reconnection together.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, having that workbook would be just awesome. I look forward to that very much. Now, the other part I want to, before we conclude, and, what are you doing right now? I mean, you're working on the workbook and have some ideas about the movie and so forth, but are you still doing private sessions with people to...
Yes, I am. I have some workshops that I'm doing locally here in Vancouver at the moment, and you can see on drlesleyphillips.com and the MidasTree.com, you can go and you can see book signing events and workshops that I'm teaching and so on. I do private readings still, and I do them in person for people who are local, but I also do them on Skype. So anyone tuning in to this show who doesn't live in Vancouver, then I'm Dr. Lesley Phillips on Skype, and you can contact me that way if you're interested in having a reading done.
Yeah, and I've done that, and I find it that your technique and everything about it is so different than anything I ever experienced. So and in a joyful way, very beautiful. You. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I like it when I like things that are different, unique, that bring out that individual person's way of doing things.
Yes, Well, and my objective in anything I do is really to help people make that connection with themselves and their own life, and to teach them how to do these things for themselves.
Right.
And so, the emphasis of the readings is it's really taking a status report of where your life is and where it's heading and where you want to go and what's stopping you getting where you want to go, and what you can do to let go of what's stopping you. It isn't this... it's very difficult because there's a limited number of words that you can use. Psychic, clairvoyant, intuitive, spiritual counselor, and everybody has their own idea of what that is. But you're right, what I do is quite different than what most other people who would use that label would do.
Yeah, it is different. That's what I wanted to make people understand. It is different, and in a good way, and a very positive. But what I see it as is bringing awareness. You bring awareness to certain things that, it's not fortune telling or anything like that. I mean,
no,
I actually don't do anything with anybody that does that, but I love it, and I so appreciate you taking the time to share with us and to let people know the book's out now, and it's such a joyful treat. And so thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing this with all of our viewers.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Oh, you're very welcome. Wasn't that amazing? Thank you to my guests for sharing with us today. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share the link. You can join us for live shows by going to letsgetrealchattingwithcatherine.com and listen to the replays from the show page, preview guests, and explore links to our Facebook fan page, WordPress blog, and more. We are creating an exquisite world. Until next time, take care.